The following is for information purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. All opinions and views expressed by the contributors to this podcast are in a personal capacity only. They do not represent the views of Progressive Equity Research or any other organisation mentioned in this podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to Talk Tech from Progressive with George O'Connor and myself, Ian Robertson, the podcast where we talk about the UK small and mid-cap listed tech market and try and bring some facts and understanding to bear. George, what's caught your attention this week?
Oh, hey there, Ian. I've spent this week reading your research into DP Poland and Virtue Motors. Sort of my takeaway is really pondering the notion of disruptors. So I've seen NVIDIA shares that they're up 138% year to date, and I thought they were having a good year last year. But really, I'm also concerned around the crash of Cazoo. Cazoo was to disrupt the UK used market, darling of tech startup land, a $7 billion US SPAC on NYSE. But also you had Alex Chesterman in there, somebody who understands how digital can impact analog markets. Ian, what are your learnings here in terms of the nature of disruption and how analog markets are still being disrupted, or possibly in the case of Cazoo, not being disrupted as increasingly processes become digitized? Ian, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that it never quite works out how you think it's going to work out, because Domino's Pizza, I looked at the Polish part of it. Pizza delivery businesses, would anyone really regard that as being a huge beneficiary of digitalization and the move to the mobile internet? Probably not, let's face it. And yet you can juxtapose that against Cazoo, which comes out to the world and says, look, here's a huge industry, used car retail, which is generally an unsatisfactory human experience. And they say, well, we can change that. We can be a more user-friendly, less aggressive model. One of these businesses has worked and has done extremely well, and the other one has failed. For me, you've got to actually look at how people use things. You can't just say that internet and technology is going to change a fundamental business, because Domino's Pizza, what technology has done, it has made it far more interactive. You've got far more information. It's far more convenient. You've got visibility through to what's happening with your pizza. So it's a huge jump forward that no one was really thinking about when we were thinking about how you build this business and how is this business going to take off over the decades. Because the general story has always been roll out more stores, roll out more franchises, add more things to the menu. And even with that, actually, when you add more things to the menu, that helps with technology, because when the buyer is there poised to press the button and say, I want this, you can suggest more things. We're all used to being suggested this, that, and the other on Amazon, and people who bought this also bought that. These aren't new things, are they? If you go to the supermarket, you get offered things just as you're at the checkout. You're using old school principles, old school understanding of how people behave, but you just have to understand how technology can improve things. You don't have to think along the lines of technology is going to fundamentally change things.
If I can stop you, Ian, you were talking through the sort of, the classic deployment waves of technology. So in the first instance, tech takes an existing process and it throws tech at it. It will automate people-based processes. It will give you less errors. It will make it faster, make it more audible. Also, in fairness, the convenience side as well, and then make it cheaper. But tech only starts there. Then it moves into adjacencies. It enables us to do brand new things. Where do you see the impact of digital in terms of that disruptive element coming through?
What is actually disruptive in all this? This is the problem. Whether or not is there any real disruption with Domino's Pizza Poland? It's just enabling you to do things that you weren't able to do in an analog context. Didn't mean you didn't want to do them. And I think that's one of the things that people get overexcited about.
Yeah.
But the issue that I have when we look at Cazoo is that, yes, Cazoo can take away the negotiation, make everything terribly clean. But it doesn't necessarily make it a better business model. Because fundamentally, when you look at what a car retailer is, what a car distributor is, it's not just buying and selling second-hand cars. You can do that as well as you like. You can have the best reputation in the market. But at the end of the day, the business model for getting cars out in the market from a new car and keeping those new cars on the road and then the new cars turning into used cars is very different. And what Cazoo have only tried to do is to disrupt a part of a pre-existing business model that works very well, thank you very much. And it's a little bit to the shame of the investment community that they don't stand back and say, hold on, look at these things, look at the Pendragons, look at the virtues out there. How do they make money? Well, you're making 8% margins, high single figure gross margins on selling a used car. You're making similar-ish kinds of margins selling a new car. Where you actually make money as a car dealer is in after sales. After sales, you're making 50% gross. You're making more money there than you are within retail, the bit that Cazoo was going after. And you've got twice the size of the bit that Cazoo was going after anyway, because you've got new and used car. So this is great to say you're disrupting something, but you're disrupting something that you can't disrupt because you're only disrupting part of the business model.
Ian, earlier you talked about one of the gains from digital is to improve the customer experience. And there's a general feeling in terms of the car experience, it has been a poor customer experience, and technology has classically done really well in improving customer experience. Then sadly, you sidled into discussing the underlying unit economics. And that's where Cazoo had the challenge.
I think the idea that in the industry that customer service isn't as good as it should be is pretty well understood. And we can talk about Virtue and the way in which they try to focus on doing customer service well. And the idea that if you've got customer service, you sell the new car, you'll get service revenues, and then they'll come and trade in the car at the end of it all. They understand that, and they try and use technology to try and improve it. But yes, it is a fundamental issue with the nature of the beast, and to a certain extent, the nature of the beast in who are you going to hire? What's your incentivization model for salespeople? It's always going to be difficult to stand back from that. But even though Virtue have tried to do this, people still want to see people and have contact with people in doing these transactions. They want to see the physical item. Even in the white van market, where Virtue has an online and a direct operation, there is still contact between humans at some point in it all. There's always got to be something there. And I think unit economics is always going to be an argument point, really. But as you say, once I come back to the good old 50% gross margins on any kind of service, it does rather sort of trump everything. If that business wasn't there, if we all did servicing somewhere else, then yes, Cazoo could well have built a very nice business. But that's not actually the business model that it was trying to disrupt. And I'm not entirely sure what Alex Chesterman's view of the business model was, given that he took out 100 million on the float. And you only had to look back in that time to find that there were a series of other similar businesses all lining up for a float as well. So when we consider the business model, we also have to understand the listed market business model.
Also, when you spoke on Virtue, you talked me through a company that understands customer lifetime value. And if we think of sort of disruptors, one of their big things will be lifetime value. To what extent is it that the industry at large was able to disrupt the Cazoo model, which in fairness, Cazoo was trying to disrupt, and he was actually, hoisted by his own petard. The industry moved faster than he did in thinking about how do we improve the underlying unit economics.
Well, when you're making 8% gross margin on new or used car sales, you're always thinking about underlying economics. There's no sort of sit back and let's think about how this is going. And also your inventories are huge in this industry. You're turning over stuff very rapidly and there are wild swings up and down. It is an industry that is very attuned to information and technology. It just has to have a human face.
Right. As we think about the deployment models of technology in the past, after they've taken existing process, throw technology, improve, automate, faster, auditable, cheaper, then they start doing mad things and going into adjacencies. and moving, expanding the remit. If we think about Cazoo and Chesterman's pathway into it, not just from Zoopla, but also, in fairness, from Love Film, which started from DVDs and tried to move into streaming kind of thing and acquired bits of Amazon, then was acquired by Amazon. The company in there will have been cognizant of this sort of evolutionary model that you expand into new things and you look for adjacencies. As you sort of take your crystal ball out on Virtue, where do you see the expansion there? Or if you look at DP Poland, where do you see the evolution of that business model?
It's almost filling in the cracks in the wall, as it were, or just making the finish smoother. There are always little bits which you think, oh, that could be better, or maybe we could do that in a different way. There are two examples that strike me about Virtue, is that you can look at the car that's in the service bay, have a quick scan around it, and then you can identify other things that need doing. You can then email the details of that to the customer. The customer says, oh, yes, I need that doing. And lo and behold, you've got an incremental sale. And actually, you've probably got a better bit of customer service without actually having to have much humanity in it all. That's one way, but there's an interesting flick around another way, which is that they have discovered that when you come in for service and you drop your keys off at the automated drop-off box, the little interactive screen isn't averse to asking a few blunt questions like, do you want a new car? Which even in car retail, they tend to find people are averse to actually asking straight up and blunt questions like that. Somehow or other, asking fairly blunt and direct questions like that quickly, tick this box if you're interested in a test drive, tick this box if you want new details of this or evaluation on your car. That's actually quite easy and it's acceptable in technology. So it does work both ways.
Very good. Ian, there's another company on our horizon. It's a Chinese Gen Z fast fashion retailer, Shein, which is thinking about a London listing. And that would be sort of, London gains at NYSE's expense. Or you could argue it's coming to London potentially because of US investor concerns, plus the whole notion around China and the US trade dispute. Shein would also be a disruptor in a classic market around clothing, retail. And London is really good at this segment. We've got stuff like Ocado, ASOS, Boohoo. We've got an established investor base who understands the segment and understands how digital can change these end markets. Do you have any thoughts on what investors should be thinking about with a company like Shein?
Well, yes, it clearly works as a business. How long that business will work for, I don't know. Building a very long-lived retail business is difficult. You either have to have a fantastic brand or an extremely well-run business that has a general appeal. It could well be amazing, or it could just be a little bit of a pop fizz firework.
Yeah. How about the China bit, and how about ESG?
Well, China and ESG, do we want to separate the two? There are clear Uyghur concerns. There's clear concerns about the environmental issue of disposable fashion. To a certain extent, how many of these things are actually going to get dealt with by other departments rather than the fund managers? I'm not sure. It's one of those ones where it should be analysis, but it may all come down to sentiment.
Right. Okay. Great point. So there is plenty of room for disruptors.
Plenty of room for disruptors, plenty of room for other things other than the top 7 stocks in the world.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ian.
Brought to you by Progressive Equity.